Welcome, everyone. You do not want to direct questions to me. I am a large animal technician. While I can answer that kind of stuff, Anne is the expert on this. I am merely the Vanna White to her Pat Sajak, for those of you that are old enough to get that joke. But I'm very excited. This is the second of our speaker series for this fall. Ann Wortinger is a triple threat, basically. She is a three-time veterinary technician specialist. She's been with the program pretty much since the beginning. She was one of our very first faculty hires. She is an incredible wealth of knowledge, not to mention, and an internationally known speaker. And I am very excited to have her talk to you guys today about nutrition. And I'm going to go away and pass it on over to Anne and Poppy.
Poppy did decide to come play with us. So I have some clue what's going on instead of just talking here. And that's why we have Mary Beth, because she's amazing. So one of the primary ways that people decide what kind of pet food they're going to feed is to look at the label. And depending on which marketing you're looking at, as to which area of the label they'll direct you at. So what we're going to do is just cover what information is on that label and how you can use it to make a decision. Because listening to the teenager at the pet store is probably not your best bet. Let me see if I can move. My bar is in the wrong place here. There we go. So what is a pet food label? First thing we need to understand is it is a legal document. There are things that the government, we're going to talk about AAFCO and FDA, require to be on that label. And then there's a lot of other stuff that isn't required but makes it look pretty. So the regulations are provided by AAFCO, which is the American Association of Feed Control Officials. It is not a regulatory agency. It just provides recommendations. And this is under the jurisdiction of the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA. So AAFCO sets the regulations based on science and a committee as to what needs to be on the label and how it needs to be formatted. Sometimes the instructions are very specific, sometimes they're very vague, just like we would expect with any other government information. And the manual is published yearly. You can access some parts of the content without getting the manual, but that's how they raise money, is to sell the manual. And I think it's $350 this year. So when you look at a food, if it is the only food that we are feeding to an animal, we want it complete and balanced. But what does complete and balanced mean? It means that it's nutritionally adequate for feed for animals other than man. Okay, in veterinary medicine, we work on every species except humans. It is compounded to be fed as a sole ration. So it would be like you eating a cereal that would be complete and balanced for you for the rest of your life. We as humans think that is abhorrent. Dogs and cats are very fixed and are very happy with eating the same food day in and day out. And this food must be capable of maintaining life and or promoting production, so reproduction, without additional substances except water. So you should not have to add a whole bunch of supplements to a food if it is complete and balanced. Now, when we talk about balanced, we're looking at a food that has all the required nutrients, so amino acids, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, and minerals, based on the recommendations of recognized authorities in the field of animal nutrition. These are usually going to be AAFCO and the NRC, which is the National Regulatory Council, and they make recommendations on what the minimum maximum levels of nutrients are. It is supposed to be formulated for a specific species, and the function should be provided. And when we start talking about function, we want to know, does the food support reproduction, gestation, and lactation, so growth, adult, or all life stages? Those are the only ones we have right now. So what does AAFCO require be on a label? A product name, a net weight, and most of our Products now will have weight in pounds and kgs, not just in pounds. Name and address of the manufacturer. We'll get into that a little bit more. It requires a name and address. It does not have to be helpful. A guaranteed analysis, and that will be changing within the next couple of years. A list of ingredients, the intended species, and this is especially important when we start talking about feline and ferret nutrition, and a statement of nutritional adequacy. So let's cover each one of these and see what it is. So on our principal display panel, on a shelf, this would be the panel that is facing outward so that you can see it. We're going to have product identity: cat food, dog food, ferret food, rabbit food. Statement of intent: complete and balanced or supplemental only. And then the net weight. Anything else on that label is extra. So the cute pictures, the graphics, the wolf jumping over the log, those are all extras. Those are not required. So that would be under optional. So our product vignette, picture of the food. Sometimes manufacturers will put the size of the kibble up there, which if you've got a really small animal can be helpful. Though a lot of small dogs do not know that they need to eat small kibbles, and they will work their way through the big ones. A nutritional claim, and we'll cover that in a bit. Bursts and flags, so all the fancy stuff. Now our information panel is going to be on the side. Our ingredient statement, our guaranteed analysis, nutritional adequacy statement, feeding guidelines. They have to be on there. They don't have to be helpful. And a manufacturer distributor. Not all foods are manufactured by the product company. There are co-packers who will run products for multiple manufacturers. Most of our foods do have UPCs because we scan everything. Batch information isn't required, but it is very helpful. And then a freshness date. Those can help if we have recalls or if we have any problems with the food, so that the manufacturer can see when it was produced and if there's a problem with it. So just a sample label. Now, one of the things we see in marketing a lot with pet food is that it is the natural ancestral diet. Okay. If you're a cat, your natural ancestral diet is not beef. It is not lamb. It is not even chicken. It's little mousies, little voles, shrews, maybe baby bunnies, depending on your hunting skill, small birds, and insects. But do we see any foods based on that? Though insects are becoming more popular. We're doing a lot of research looking into insect-based foods. Consumer buy-in has been a little iffy on that. Miss Jen can tell you how some of the worms taste. She's tried them. So when we start looking at Dr. K's natural food, our vignette is our little mouse. We're going to have what our primary ingredient is, field mouse for cats. So it's clearly stated that this is for cats, complete and balanced for adult maintenance. So we've met all of our AAFCO requirements there. On our ingredients are listed by weight, which means a wet ingredient will always place higher than a dry ingredient. So we have water sufficient for processing. So, we can't just shove the little mices in a can. We got to process them. Michigan grown, whole ground, wild field mice. Our guaranteed analysis, and this is given as minimums and maximums. The actual food may be above or below, as long as they are within those minimums and maximums. This food says that feeding studies were done, which means this food was fed to no less than 8 cats over a period of 6 months, and then assessed whether it was complete and balanced and there was any problems with the cats. This was manufactured in Belleville, Michigan. Gives you a phone number. You don't have a mailing address. Other than a phone number, you don't have any way to contact them. And then feeding recommendations. My problem with most of the feeding recommendations on the food is they don't take into account the lifestyle or activity level of the animal, the sexual status of the animal, and whether the owners even know what the actual weight of the animal is. So we can feed for an 11 to 15 pound cat 1 to 1.5 cans a day. Maybe that's adequate, maybe that's not. As a nutrition nerd, I regularly like to calculate things out. I want to know, so I'm never going to follow the recommendations on a package. If I'm figuring things out for you, I'm going to calculate it out. I'm not going to follow the recommendations. So our principal display panel, front panel. This is the part of the label that is most likely to be displayed, presented, shown, or examined under customary conditions or display for retail sale. So we aren't going to put that bag up with the side panel showing. We want to show all the pretty pictures. And this is a means of attracting the consumer's attention, because we like pretty things, don't we? And it should immediately communicate the product's identity. Cat food, dog food, complete and balanced, supplemental. It will be on there, whether it's obvious or not, can be sometimes a bit of a challenge. So our product identity. So it is the name that the company gives that food. It must include the product name and the brand name. So if we're feeding Purina Cat Chow, we know that our brand name is Purina. Our product name is Cat Chow. And the manufacturer's name is the same as the product name. It isn't always. Different companies will have different lines of food. Purina has quite a few lines of food. So our brand name is the name by which that pet food is given by the company. So Cat Chow provides information about the individual product within a particular brand. Most pet food manufacturers will have multiple types of food that they're selling, and they may have multiple lines of those types that they're selling. So species, they must identify on the product display panel the intended species, and it needs to be specific and in common terms. This is called the designator or statement of intent, and it's intended to help consumers purchase food. This is of particular concern for our cats. Cats cannot be fed dog food long term. They can eat a kibble here or there. That's not going to hurt them. But dog food is deficient in taurine, methionine, cysteine, and arachidonic acid, and will cause problems in cats if fed long term. So even if you just want to save a few bucks and just feed dog food to everybody, it is not a good idea. The species does not indicate that that food may not be fed to an alternate species. So one of the things that we do commonly is we feed cat food to ferrets. Ferret food is not commonly available in a lot of areas. So cat food is a suitable substitute for ferrets. For rabbits, they can be fed guinea pig food. Guinea pigs, however, cannot be fed rabbit food. Guinea pigs, like people, are one of the few species that does not manufacture their own vitamin C. Neither do humans. If you feed a guinea pig rabbit food long term, you will develop a vitamin C deficiency, which affects energy production. Designator or statement of intent. Which species are we doing? Dog, cat, puppy, kitten. One of the things to keep in mind is that senior is not a legal designation for pet foods, because medically, seniors include a very large amount of the population, but also each senior will have different requirements. So adult is what we feed to seniors. We may feed a higher calorie adult, a lower calorie adult, depending on what that individual's needs are. But there is no geriatric recommendations for dogs and cats. So our net weight can be given in pounds or grams, kilograms, must be somewhere near the bottom 1/3 of that bag. So whip out your little tape measure see where it is. It's usually right at the bottom, usually a little under the curve. Vignettes or pictures. Companies invest a lot of time and money to make their packaging look pretty. We want the vignette to be representative of that product. So you can put a picture of the food on the front of the product. And as anybody who's eaten a frozen dinner, that what's in there is not necessarily what the picture looks like, but it have all the same ingredients. We cannot, however, put misrepresentation of that food. So we are not going to put down that one, we're going to turn your chihuahua into a killer. They can do that all on their very own. They don't need food for that. But we want it to look similar to what the actual food is going to look like. This is especially important when we're looking at canned products, is to whether they are pate, whether they are shredded with sauce, whether they are ground with gravy, all sorts of different things can have a different look. And when we start looking at our nutritional claim, so this is going to be on our side panel. Complete and nutritious, complete and balanced. Those are the things that we want to see. We want to see that for a lot of the really high-end products will say not intended for or intended for supplemental feeding. So churros is one of the things my cats really like. 10 calories a tube, no big deal, really good for training, but it is not intended because it is not complete and balanced. So it's only supplemental feeding. So the information panel, side panel, the FDA describes this as a part of the label immediately contiguous and to the right of the product display panel. Well, that takes you to the side. Contains additional product information. Now, we have a beagle on this label. Does that mean this food can only be fed to beagles? No. Any suitably interested dog could be fed this food. So ingredients are arranged, listed in decreasing order by weight. Because of that, usually meats will be higher on the list, even if they are not the most prominent ingredient. And having meat as your first ingredient is not usually that important. You're not able to highlight one single ingredient, so they can't bold it, underline it, put it in fancy print. The ingredients provide no information on the quality of the ingredients going in. Splitting of ingredients is allowed, and we will show that, but you can have wheat middlings, wheat bran, wheat flour. All of those are allowed, even if it's all from whole grain wheat. Dry ingredients will appear lower on the list. Our vitamins and minerals, along with the preservatives, tend to be at the very bottom. So what isn't included? The quality of the ingredients. One of the things that we hear is that it is human grade. There is no such thing. That is a marketing term. Human grade does not exist. If a truck with a load of chicken goes to the human manufacturer on the right, it is human grade. If it goes to the dog food manufacturer, same product, same quality, it is now animal grade. It has to do where it goes, not necessarily the quality of the meat. It doesn't tell you the amino acid content or the bioavailability. Is the body able to access that nutrient? Mineral availability, and most minerals are in the form of salts or are chelated, which means they're a combination, and that can affect their ability to be absorbed by the body. And the amount of non-digestible materials. And there may or may not be a lot of non-digestible materials. If we don't know what the digestibility is, then something becomes non-digestible. Commonly, we're going to see statements for foods that are the same as or the same ingredients as. And that's, that's like buying a Yugo instead of a Lincoln. They all have the same parts, but it doesn't mean that the quality of the parts is the same. So splitting of ingredients. This is common with our grains and with most of the carbohydrates, but they can also split ingredients for the meats. So this occurs when we've got wheat germ, wheat middlings, wheat bran, wheat flour. That is all part of the whole grain wheat. It is usually not necessarily fractionated before it goes in. Really depends on how the manufacturer gets that product, but it does allow it to be placed lower on the ingredient label, which is a perception thing, not a nutrient availability thing. So what is split ingredients? You're telling me I have to list it by weight. So if I split it into two different things, it goes down farther. Dry ingredients may appear lower on the list due to a lower moisture content. And meat products appear higher on the list because the public perception is that a meat-based product is better. That isn't necessarily true. You want to look at the nutrient availability, which isn't on the label. You're not going to find that, instead of the ingredients. So if a manufacturer is telling you to look at the ingredients and see what is the first one listed, I can tell you when I look at a pet food label, I skip like the first 4 or 5 ingredients. I want to know right now what the fibers are in there, because those are functional fibers that are going to provide. Usually I'm dealing with diarrhea animals, so I want to see what kind of fibers are in there and how that's going to help the GI biome. So our guaranteed analysis, and this is the worst case scenario. So what is the minimum amount of crude protein that we can have? What is the minimum amount of fat? What is the maximum amount of fiber and the maximum amount of moisture? They have to come within those, but they don't have to be exact. It gives you kind of a ballpark. And depending on the manufacturer as to how close to those minimum maximums they're going to come. So guaranteed analysis guarantees what? So crude protein is an estimate of the total protein in the food. Gives you an idea of the quantity of the protein, but not the quality. And there are different qualities, just like the difference between a filet mignon and a flank steak. They're both cow, but you have different quality, digestibility, cookability. When we look at crude fat, this is an estimate of the lipid content in the food, but it isn't telling us saturated, unsaturated, and whether we've got our essential fatty acids. Crude fiber, a lot of people view fibers as fillers, and they are not. Fibers feed the bacteria in the gut. And depending on the fibers as to how well those bacteria are going to be able to digest them and utilize that extra energy. Canned foods can be up to 78% moisture, which means if you're feeding a canned food over a dry food, you're going to feed more. Sometimes cats, if they're fed a straight canned food diet, will not drink additional water because there's enough water in the food to meet their requirements. And dry foods have anywhere from about 6 to 10%. And an animal that is fed dry food will have a higher water intake than an animal that is fed canned food. So our nutritional adequacy statement, complete and balanced for all life stages. That is the broadest. That means that you can feed it to an animal that is pregnant, that is lactating, that is growing, which are the most extensive energy requirements of any life stage, but also an animal that is an adult. So to meet those requirements is the broadest category. If it has a limited claim, it is intended for only one life stage. So puppy or kitten, which typically are also fed to pregnant and lactating, and adults. So those are the 2 primary life stages. Remember, we discussed senior does not have a life stage designation. whether it is intermittent or supplemental use. Usually these are foods that are not complete and balanced. And a lot of the canned foods, the really fancy, schmancy, got clams and stuff in them, canned foods, will say intermittent or supplemental use. They are not intended for complete and balanced. And then therapeutic diets. Therapeutic diets inherently are not complete and balanced, which is why they need to be fed under a veterinarian's care, because the animals are not normal and healthy. So we are addressing different issues related to disease processes with our therapeutic diets. So you'll see on the side of the food, and if we were live, I would be passing out food labels here for you. This product is formulated to meet the nutritional levels established by AAFCO for adult dogs. We know this food is specifically for adult dogs. It gives our maximum and minimums. This is a canned food, so it is water sufficient for processing. Soybean meal, barley, meat byproducts, and we'll discuss what meat byproducts are, and they are not bad. Poultry parts. I kind of like a little bit more information than that. Ground whole fish, salt, calcium carbonate. So now we're down to the vitamins and mineral supplements. And then the last thing, they've got beef flavoring. Iron oxide gives the food the red meaty color, provides no benefit to the animal. Iron oxide is not absorbable by the intestines. So this food, back here, this food is formulated. So when we start talking about a nutritional adequacy claim, we need to look at feeding trials are our gold standard. Then we can have nutrients calculated by the laboratory after the product is produced, or we can have what the normal estimated nutrient content is for that product before processing. And you can see where things will get a little iffy here. So when you talk about feeding guidelines, I already said I don't follow them. They're going to tell me what the kcal amount is, and then I'm going to calculate out what the animal's requirements are. But it is required to be on there, so they're going to provide something, may or may not be helpful. And I think this has probably contributed to our pet population being 66% or more overweight or obese. Doesn't account for activity or individual variability. It's very general. It's like saying you can have 2 Big Mac meals a day. Well, it depends on your size, now doesn't it? So manufacturer, distributor, or dealer. The manufacturer does not necessarily going to be the person that is making the food, packing the food, or sending the food out. So this is usually found on the information label. It is required, but it doesn't need to be complete. Better manufacturers include the most information. They will provide a website, they will provide a phone number, they will provide a mailing address, anything that you could want in ways to get a hold of them. Does not indicate the food is a fixed or variable feed formula. You would have to contact the manufacturer to find that out. And a fixed feed formula is going to have the same nutrients and the same amount every single run. A variable feed formula is going to be one where, you know, if corn is a little cheaper this week, we bought more corn. I'm still within my guaranteed analysis, but it's going to have more corn in it than it had last week. It's still legal, but if you've got an animal with a sensitive digestive tract, they may get diarrhea when you buy the new bag of food. And we've got a toll-free number, when they're most likely to answer the phone. We've got an address. These labels were taken before the internet was widely available. Foster Canning in Napoleon, Ohio. What's our chances of getting a hold of them? Not real good. Though Napoleon, Ohio is pretty small. Universal Product Codes, or UPCs. Most places that are selling across state lines are going to include these. Batch numbers. They're usually a printed in little box at the bottom because it will be produced every time the batch is run through the machine. Date of manufacture, freshness dating, those are all optionals. So when we start looking at who are we going to check for information? WSAVA is the World Small Animal Veterinary Association. They have got a lot of information on what they call their Global Nutrition Toolkit that will provide information on doing body condition scoring, muscle condition scoring, what to look for in pet foods, what to look for in manufacturers. The Pet Nutrition Alliance, which is Dare to Ask. And these websites I did check them last week, so they are good. And then the AVMA, Nutrition Matters. That the AVMA is the American Veterinary Medical Association, and this is another tool for pet foods. And that was our whirlwind tour on how to read a product label. So any of you that are at home, go grab your pet food, see what it says on the label, and then we can discuss it. So any questions? Get somebody in the chat. Yes, there will be time for questions and answers.
There are not currently any questions in the Q&A.
Come on, guys, I gave you plenty of time here. Okay, so hopefully you're going to feel a little more confident next time you go into the pet store and start looking at what you're currently feeding, what you may want to feed. The best recommendation I can give you is to talk to your veterinarian about what diets to feed. We are having a number of dietary related health issues that are showing up in animals with the big influx of smaller producers of food. Back in, so I graduated a long time ago, and back in the early 1980s, Dr. Paul Pion, as part of his residency research, found that taurine was required by cats. Before that time, we didn't know that. We just know that we would see a lot of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in cats, reproductive problems in purebred cats that were trying to get pregnant, and we would see retinal degeneration in cats and didn't understand why. And one of the things that we found out is that taurine is an essential nutrient for cats. And when canned food is processed, that processing tends to destroy some of the inherent taurine in the food. And when we started supplementing that, we very seldom see any hypertrophic cardiomyopathy related to food on animals, cats fed commercial diets. The other problem that we're seeing right now is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in dogs that are being fed diets that are high in, they're called pulses or legumes, so peas, legumes, some of the other non-grain based carbohydrates. We can see it with taro and some of the other products that manufacturers are using to replace grains. And I'd like you to remember that even if it's grain-free, does not make it carbohydrate low. Diets that are replacing the grain with other ingredients can still have very high carbohydrate content, which isn't good or bad, but it can affect nutrient digestibility. We've got, sometimes people wonder about changing nutritional needs as pets age. Any recommendations? I would definitely listen to what your veterinarian is telling you. One of the big things that we have seen recently is diets that are designed to support arthritic animals. So we do have over-the-counter foods, which because of the AAFCO requirements can only have a certain level. but our therapeutic diets can have a higher level of some of the glucosamine chondroitin supplements. And we're seeing joint diet and kidney diet and joint diet and liver diet because it is not against the rules to get more than one problem. And most older animals will develop more than one problem during their lifetime. That if you think that your animal may benefit from a diet change, talk to your veterinarian, talk to the technicians about what options are available and what would be the best one to try. And it's important to remember that whenever we're feeding a food, we need to make the veterinarian happy, the owner happy, and the pet happy. And if the animal doesn't eat it, it doesn't matter what our recommendation is. That we need to make sure that animals have got enough nutrients for everything that we want them to do. I've got one of my cats is 11 years old. The vet thought she was in great body condition. I felt that she was a little bit underweight, just like a half pound. So I switched her to a higher calorie adult food. My animals eat exclusively out of puzzles, so they don't eat out of bowls. And Poppy is my 11-year-old cat. She has one puzzle that she likes that the other cats don't like. So Poppy gets a special food in her puzzle on an as-needed basis as a supplement to what the rest of the cats are getting. It is still a complete and balanced diet, and it's still an adult formulation, but it is a higher calorie food so that I can get a couple extra calories in her. It's always a good idea with older animals to have them a little on the, I don't want to say heavier side, but I like to have them, I don't like them really lean. Because, especially with cats are great at developing thyroid disease and kidney disease, both of which weight loss is a common component to that. So if I've got a little bit more weight on my older animals, I have a little bit more wiggle room when we're treating. That gives me a little bit more time to let the medications do their job and makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. And I'll recommend the same thing to clients. I don't want a morbidly obese cat, so no 20-pounders running around, but just a little on the heavier side as they age.
There is a question. What are your thoughts on raw diet for dogs, which includes fresh vegetables, fruits, meats?
Okay, the first problem with most raw diets is they are not complete and balanced. They are not following government regulations, and they have not had feeding trials. If you are making your own raw diet, you are inherently exposing your animal to large amounts of bacteria from that meat because most of the meat is ground. If it is not ground, we don't know how it was processed. If it has not had a feeding trial, if it has not had a chemical analysis, we don't know what the nutrient distribution is on that. There was a study done by Dr. Michelle and Dr. Freeman out of UPenn and Tufts looking at their clients. Those are both nutritionists, their clients that were feeding homemade diets. And of the diets that they examined, 100% of them, these were diets formulated by a nutritionist, but clients had substituted along the way. 100% of the diets were unbalanced. So they were not providing all the nutrients that that animal needs in a complete and balanced food. There are some options if you want to feed raw food. Instinct is one of the only companies that is doing high pressure pasteurization. So it kills the bacteria, kills the parasites that are in the raw meat. I can tell you their manufacturing facility stays at about 38 to 40 degrees the entire place. Some places are even colder. And it is complete and balanced. They have done formula reviews. They have done lots of research. So there are options if you want to feed a raw food diet. But I would not formulate your own. I would not take a recipe off the internet. If you are going to formulate feed on your own, you need to talk to a veterinary nutritionist. And there are a number of nutritionists that will formulate homemade diets for you. Remember that when you formulate a homemade diet, though, the veterinary nutritionist is going to plug those ingredients into a calculator. There is no way to feed a complete and balanced food formulated at home without vitamin and mineral supplements in it. You can't do it. So work with a veterinarian, work with a veterinary nutritionist, or buy a food that we know has had pasteurization and has done research on it. So that's a lot of things to look at for feeding a raw diet.
Could you talk a little bit about food allergies and limited protein diets? Because it does seem like there's a lot of dogs that have food allergies, or even cats that have food allergies.
Food allergies, unfortunately, do not exist to the extent that marketing would have you believe. For animals, most food allergies present with skin problems. They will have itchy ears, they will have an itchy mouth, they will have hair loss over their dorsum, they will have hair loss on their belly from over grooming. Those are the signs we see with an animal that has an actual food allergy. We would not diagnose a food allergy unless we had endoscopic biopsies that showed an increase in the allergy cells in that intestine. Food allergies in animals do not cause vomiting, do not cause diarrhea. Lots of other things can cause vomiting and diarrhea, but it is not food allergies. If you are looking to do limited ingredient feeding, it is very hard to do that with over-the-counter foods because, one, there is no regulation that says that they have to clean the machines between running foods. So the incidence of cross-contamination is very high. Two, you cannot get true limited ingredient diets over the counter. They will have 2 or 3 different ingredients, which isn't really limited. If you have a food allergy, and it has been documented by the veterinarian, there are, one of our biggest recommendations right now is hydrolyzed foods. So these are foods that have been broken up. The amino acids have been broken down so small that the body no longer recognizes it as an allergen. That hydrolyzed diets are available from Hills, Purina, and Royal Canin. These foods are going to be complete and balanced for long-term use. You can also get a limited ingredient therapeutic diet that is going to either have it usually has 1 protein, 1 carbohydrate. They will have the vitamin mineral supplements that you need to keep it complete and balanced without causing restrictions in specific nutrients. So unless your animal is having skin signs, it probably does not have a food allergy. Skin testing is the only way to verify allergies. Plasma or blood testing is not seen as valid in veterinary patients. And if it's a GI problem, I want biopsies, whether they're endoscopic or surgical. That's going to let us know what cells are involved, the degree of involvement, and what kind of changes we've got going on the intestinal wall and how it's affecting absorption. So even though that may be a little cost prohibitive, keep buying food that the animal's not going to eat. And that's one of the big problems we see with GI diseases. Animals with chronic GI diseases, they'll buy them a new food, they eat it really well for a couple weeks, and then they start going down. And then you buy a new food, you've still got half that old bag. They eat it for a couple of weeks, and then that starts going down. Animals are a lot smarter than we are. If something hurts, they're usually going to stop doing it. If we followed that, there would be a whole lot less Tequila Tuesdays. Because I think a lot of people on Wednesdays are not feeling good, but hey, they go right back out the next week. Dogs and cats aren't going to do that. If it hurts, they're usually going to stop. I had seen a comment about mixing medications with the food. I'm not a proponent of that for a number of reasons. One, if you're feeding more than one animal, you don't know that all that medicine got into that animal. Dogs are a lot easier if you put it in a treat. Cats can be. My cat when you throw the treat, he's making the value judgment. Does it have something in it or doesn't it? And if he thinks that that food, that treat landed and sounded a little heavier, he's not going to eat it. He's not going to touch it. And this cat has had treats every day from the time he was 1 year old till he was 4 years old, when he decided to get herpes really, really bad. So I would not recommend mixing it with the food. You can give it in treats. My favorite current method right now is to work on cooperative care. And what that involves, and there is a number of, Monique Fairchild is one of the veterinary behavior technicians that works on cooperative care. We cover it in Fear Free, but that is getting the animal, and it's what we see in our zoo animals whenever they do their training. Because you can't go in and you're not going to pill the lion, are you? But you need to have them cooperate, come up to the enclosure, the fence that we're working at, engage with the keepers. So we do the same thing with dogs and cats. The handsome cat that we showed at the end of the PowerPoint is my herpes cat. All 5 cats have herpes, but he tends to get it worse than anybody else. And he is on daily medications. We do it in the evening. A lot of times he will come looking for me, but he will come when he's called. And we use treats to encourage him and to reward him for taking his pill. Now, I still pill him to make sure that it went in. He will not eat the food if the pill is mixed there. He won't eat treats if the pill is in there. He won't take it any other way. But with cooperative care, we can encourage him to work with his healthcare provider, me, in how to do this. One thing we have found out, though, that his training does not transfer to other people. He works with mom, but he won't work with anybody else, which didn't work really well when mom was gone for 10 days, that he didn't get his medicine because he wasn't buying that from anybody else.
So, Ann, there's a question. I keep seeing ads for pet food from the makers of it's called Gentle Giants, that they claim that pets like a Great Dane can live to be 20 years old. What do you think
Mm-mm.
about that? And how can they advertise that?
It's only illegal when you get caught. You can put anything you want on a label, and until the government is notified that you are breaking the law, nothing is going to happen. You can make any claim you want unless you can back it up by science. One of the few longevity studies that we've got is a Labrador study that was done by Purina. And if you go and Google Labrador feeding study, Purina, it is a 14-year study that was done on a group of Labradors. And I want to say 50 dogs, but I'm not positive. And what they were looking at is actually the development of orthopedic problems, which is common in our Labradors, and obesity. And they fed these dogs the same food. And then one group of dogs was fed 25% less than their pair mate. So the pair mates were not obese, not overweight, and the dogs that were fed less were not underweight. There was at both ends of our spectrum. And what they did find is that the incidence of orthopedic disease was less in the lighter weight dogs, but also the incidence of cancers. And they lived on average 1.5 years longer than their pair mates that were just a little bit heavier. That's one of the few longevity studies that we've got on dogs. So we can say, we know, Chihuahuas and Poodles are some of the longest lived dog breeds we've got. Our giant breed dogs, God, if we can get them to 10 or 12 years, we're doing really, really good. They get cancers, they get all sorts of other problems, they get orthopedic problems. When you've got a 120-pound dog that can't stand on its own, that is not doable for an owner for the most part. That you can make any claim that you want until you are caught. So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Are there any supplements that you would recommend feeding on a regular basis?
If you're feeding a complete and balanced food, no, because they should have everything. If you have an animal that either has diagnosed orthopedic disease, so OCD, hip dysplasia, um, elbow problems, anything like that, using chondroitin and glucosamine are helpful. I would not supplement omega-3 fatty acids because a complete and balanced food already is going to have the right ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. If you supplement, you are disrupting that ratio. If you are feeding a joint diet, it will have increased omega-3s with increased omega-6 to counter that. So we need to look at the ratio of our fatty acids. And if you start supplementing a food, or if you feel the need to supplement a food, that food is probably not doing what you need for that pet. So we need to remember that these foods are complete and balanced. And unless we've got, orthopedic diseases are one of the big things we're going to supplement for, but you're better off keeping the animal lighter, well exercised, so that the muscles are strong, rather than providing supplements for when things go bad. So let's work on preventative measures rather than corrective measures. Does that make sense?
Any
Especially as a person who has got a young retriever breed dog.
any last questions? Got a couple minutes. Type them in now, fast and furious.
And if any questions after you get home and you look at that pet food label and you're like, oh my God, what did she say about that? Let me know. I can answer them. It's not that big of a deal. Trying to remember what was said 45 minutes ago, for my brain, does not happen very much anymore.
Ann, are you okay if I put your email in the chat?
Yeah.
There is Ann's email. Anything and everything you want to know about nutrition.
And it's helpful if you put in the subject line that you're asking about food, because spam email is a thing.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We so appreciate you all coming. We love seeing different faces from different areas. So thank you so much. Ann, that was incredible. I learned something new from you every time I listen to you speak.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.